BJ from Board Game Gumbo here. I'm talking to my guest Randy Hoyt from Foxtrot Games, and he wants to talk about the mind. So before we talk about it, let's place our hands on the table.
All right, let's
focus and make sure we've got it right. No, seriously, I want to hear your experience, and then I'm going to chime in with mine.
Yeah, no. So in the mind, there's a deck of cards numbered 1 through 100. You deal every player in the first level. You deal every player 1, and your goal is simple. It's just to play them into the center in ascending order, but you can't talk. And right. So the main way you're trying to read your other players, it's cooperative. You're trying to read the other players and think, okay, if they've got a 5, they'd have played it by now. If they had a 10, they'd have played it by now. But I've got a 24. If you had a 23, would you have played it by now? And so that kind of just trying to read the other players, trying to put yourself in their shoes. It's really, it feels like empathy is sort of the biggest emotion I get playing. Like you're trying so hard to put yourself in someone else's shoes, figure out how you would be playing if you were them. Is this a long enough time? And it's simple. The game doesn't seem like it would even be that fun, but I've just had a great time. After level 1, you do it with more cards. So everybody gets 2 cards and then 3 cards and then 4 cards. And there's just enough game around it, around the what I call a lifeline or like a shuriken. You can there's some extra action you can take that'll help you along, and you can lose a certain number of lives before the game ends. And you're trying to get to a certain level based on the player count.
Does the addition of the shuriken and the other extra bonuses, does that make it a game for you, or is it still an experience like some critics have called it?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about textbook definition, even without those, it's still, there are rules, there are actions you take, there's win-loss, at least a goal. I think that the rules the extra mechanisms do really add a lot of extra tension around. It's like, is now the time to use the shuriken? Like, is now the time just to throw away a card? It'll cost us a life, but it might clear out enough of the other cards. So it adds just enough meat to it, I think, that it really helps the game along.
Do you play with the put your hands down, stare at each other, and focus?
Oh yeah. And there's a rule you can put your hand in the middle to stop everything, and so we make a big deal about that. We're like resyncing our minds and like really getting into it. I mean, at some level, it's the game as a whole sort of seems like an illusion because you're like, you're playing a card and people watching you might think you were doing some pre-choreographed thing that's not really playing a game, but like really getting into the spirit. I do think it takes a little bit of, the players like buying into this, like, hey, we're going to sync and read each other's minds. And like, when you kind of go along with it, it's part of the fun for sure. But yeah, we get really into the whole experience.
2 big recommendations from Alex Goldsmith, my buddy from the Dukes of Dice. Steph Hodge was on the show a couple of weeks ago, and she kept raving and raving about the game. So I finally broke down. I like to usually buy the games from the publisher, from a distributor, and you just can't get it unless you get it on Amazon DE. But I realized that I had 6 NIMT. It's got 104 cards. Yeah. I could use the extras as the little bonus levels. So I went on BGG, did the PDF. I told my wife, I said, Alex says we got to play this game. Now, my wife does not like role-playing games. She likes the Euro aspects of near and far and above and below, but hates all the storytelling. So I popped the game out. And I mean, I just insisted every time that we had to just stare at each other before we lifted up our hands. And she just kept looking at me like, if we have to do this all night, I am not playing this game. So we got to level 4. I thought it was interesting. I think it would be more fun, although harder with more people. 2 people. We got to level 4 without much trouble. And I know that's not winning, but we got to level 4 without much trouble. And she got kind of bored. So we've never played it again, but I want to leave it for a bigger setting. Have you played it with various play counts?
Mostly I played it with 4, and I think players feeding off each other really adds to it. I'm trying to think of what my 2-player games have been. I don't think I played it with 3. I played it with 2 and 4. I've won it on 4. I have not won it on 2.
There was a lot of uncomfortable silence for a long-time married couple staring at each other to play. And really, it's the first card. We didn't have much trouble after that. Yeah, it's nice. Who's going to play the first card when I've got a 30 and she's got a 40,
Yeah.
Who's going to make that first move? So I'm not, as you said, from a textbook definition, it's a game. But is there strategy in it and all those things? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of strategy, I suppose, because the big skill is just learning to read each other, learning how to communicate without communicating, and to just sort of feel the empathy in the room and sync on each other's minds and wavelengths.
That's what I was going to say. To mind meld. That's what you're really trying to do there.
It is. And it's, I don't know, when I talk about it, I still feel like this can't really be this much fun because it's sort of silly. But man, it gets really intense. And I remember the first time we won, like it was definitely a stand up and high five moment, which I don't get a lot even in the other more Euro-y cooperative games that I play. So
small box game though, easy to take around. That's one that if I do pick it up, I could just throw it in a backpack. And if it's the right crowd, it seems like it would be one that maybe came out. You know, on Wednesday nights once a month, we do a little board games and brew type thing. And maybe that's a good one for a pub table when we've had a couple of root beers. What do you think?
Yeah, I'd definitely give it a try. Like I said, I've won it with 4 players. So, I mean, I think that's probably a better player count.
I'm going to stare in Dave Dugas' eyes like this until we mind meld. That's what's going to happen, Dave.